Hey guys, my name is Daniel, I'm a DP, and we're ready for another breakdown, so let's check it out. So this time it was a pretty simple shoot. It was just a white backdrop with a person speaking directly to camera. This is a very common thing you're going to encounter in corporate or sometimes even commercial work, where the talent is just talking straight to camera. So let's check out the clip.
Siempre que uno tiene un viaje es agotador, y más cuando hay que hacer largas filas. Por suerte, para quienes tienen una tarjeta Mastercard Black, podrá acceder a la fila rápida en el aeropuerto Juan Santamaría en Costa Rica. Eso sí, solo para el tarjetaviente. Este beneficio lo puede usar todas las veces que quiera, es ilimitado. ¿Cómo funciona? Antes de llegar a migración, del lado izquierdo hay un counter de Mastercard con el uniforme de la marca, donde el tarjetaviente deberá presentar su tarjeta y pase de abordar para que pueda darle acceso por la fila rápida. La fila rápida es un gran beneficio para no hacerle perder tiempo a tu cliente viajero.
Alright, so for this shoot I was the DP / gaffer / camera operator. It was a really small crew. It was just me, the producer, the director, and the talent, in this case, was on camera. The camera I used was the ZCam E2. Once again, this is the camera I've owned for a few years and it's been awesome. I fully recommend it. The lens I used was the Nikkor 85mm f1.4, and I chose this lens because first, it's great for portraits. The 85mm is known for giving really nice portraits. Also, the studio was a little bit narrow and I needed a lens that would compress a little bit the environment just so I wouldn't have any trouble with the lighting and the low ceiling. So audio setup was pretty simple. We had a Rode NTG2 boomed above talent, and we also had a backup lavalier microphone set up on the talent. So the whole concept of this shoot was just a simple white backdrop, because as you guys saw on the clip, the editor needed the space to put text and animations. So it was just a simple white backdrop with nice clean lighting. So this time, since we were working in a very controlled environment in a studio, I really took my time to look at my lighting ratios. I wanted something that wasn't really flat, and since we were lighting predominantly from one side, I wanted a 2:1 contrast ratio, which isn't very dramatic or anything, but that's the look we were going for. We want this clean, corporate, commercial kind of look. So just a little basic info, a lighting ratio is the difference in light measured in stops between one area and another. Lighting ratios can be on a talent's face, meaning how much more brighter the key side is compared to the fill side. Like in this case, it's a pretty harsh or a high contrast lighting ratio, where in this case the key is a lot brighter than the fill side. You can also find lighting ratios between the talent and the background. This is measured with the difference between the key of the talent and the amount of light on the background. So for measuring all these lighting ratios, I used my Sekonic light meter and also false color on the monitor, which is very useful. Alright, so getting into camera settings. As we can see in this little screenshot I took of the iPad while we were shooting, we shot this in ProRes 422. It was all shot in 4K resolution and at 23.98 frames per second. 4K shooting gave us the ability to crop in and post just for a little bit tighter of a shot. We shot this at ISO 500, which is the lowest native ISO of the ZCam E2, and the white balance was set at 5000 Kelvin. Everything was shot with a 180-degree shutter. And as you can see, this was shot in Rec 709. We shot in Rec 709 because there was no time for color grading. This was a very fast turnover, so we had to shoot this in Rec 709. On the key side, or the key light, we had a Godox FV150 through a pretty large octa. This was, if I remember correctly, the 150 centimeter octa, which is about 3/4 body length in this case for the talent. The fill side, on the fill we had a 4x4 beadboard. and this was filling in the shadow side. And this gave me the contrast ratio that I was looking for. I set the key light to f5.6, and that would mean that on the fill side I would need an f4. So the way I find this is just measure with my light meter on the key side a 5.6, set the light until I get 5.6, and then walk over to the fill side and measure until I get an f4, and that is a 2-to-1 contrast ratio, which means one stop under in the fill, or twice as much light on the key than the fill. Right, so the next light we have is the hair light. So up above here, directly above the talent, and behind her we have the hair light, and this was a Godox SL60. And we set this with a little bit of diffusion just to soften it up a little bit, and the diffusion was Lee 216. The light was just with the simple reflector dish, and the diffusion just taped in front of it. Alright, so the next light we had a little scratch, or a little slide light that you can see just on the edge of the talent, on her shoulder and on her arm. So this was another Godox 150, and we set this one up with a strip box. So this was a 30 by 120 strip box, and we had this with a grid, so we didn't have very much spill over the front side or the fill side of the face, so it was pretty much directional on the side and gave us a little bit of a scratch light on the edge of the talent. Alright, so the last lights we needed for this shoot were the background lights, or the lights that were hitting the backdrop. As you know, when we have a white backdrop and we don't light it, it'll probably turn up gray on camera. So we needed some soft, even lighting on the backdrop just so it would reach a higher level or reach pure white. So we had two panel lights, the soft panel lights on the backdrop. These were pointing straight to the backdrop, avoiding the talent because we wanted to separate the lighting from the backdrop and the talent. So these were just some LED panels. So once again, talking about ratios, so the difference between the key light or the key side of the talent and the backdrop was probably around 3 stops, just so we could have a pure white background but avoid clipping. Alright, so that means that the backdrop was probably around f16, so that's 3 stops over the key light. And that difference in latitude between the shadows and the backdrop, which is the brightest part, is inside the dynamic range of the camera. So probably the darkest parts are around f4 to the brightest part, which is f16. So that's under the 11-12 stops of the ZCam, so that would retain all the information in the shot. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed that little breakdown. Like I said, it was a pretty simple setup, but it's something you're going to come across very often in corporate and commercial work, where a client needs just a white, clean backdrop with some nice lighting on talent. If you guys have any questions or comments, just leave them down below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. See you next time.